With this, it brings us to almost the end of our 2020 Annual Forum. Let me now bring Dr. Ma back to the stage to do the closing remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I think it's pretty late already, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I do have the urge to say something on some of the many important issues that's popping up in today's discussion. First of all, it's a carbon neutrality, which I think is probably the most discussed topic today. And China announced a carbon neutrality target. It was followed by Japan and Korea, and we're looking forward to the US to announce carbon neutrality target in the not very distant future as well. So with all of that, the implication for us in the green finance space is that we need to expect very significant acceleration in energy transition. In China in particular, I think the renewable energy installation in the coming 5 years will be stronger than most people expected. And in the building sector, not only the traditional green buildings will be promoted in terms of 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, but I think zero carbon buildings will be introduced as a standard. And in the transportation space, I think electric vehicles will grow much stronger than we saw before. And infrastructure for green transportation, such as electric vehicle charging stations, will be built in a lot of places. And finally, manufacturing needs to decarbonize as well, although it's probably more difficult than energy, than transportation, than building, but it requires lots of technology. So green technology, low carbon technology need to be developed in our economy and they need to be imported as well. So in that space, PE and VC, I think, will play a very major role in facilitating low carbon transition. So if we have all these sectors, energy, transportation, building, manufacturing, moving towards zero carbon in the coming few decades, we have the goal achieved. And in terms of finance, all of these will translate into much stronger demand for green finance, and also will eventually translate into much stronger increase in supply of green financial services, including those from Hong Kong. The second topic that popped up so much today is disclosure and also environmental risk analysis in the form of scenario analysis, stress testing, and so on. Let me actually re-announce on behalf of Shenzhen government that they just published the Shenzhen Green Finance legislation in the afternoon. And in that document, they said financial institutions in Shenzhen will be required on a mandatory basis to disclose environmental information. I think that's more aggressive than most other jurisdictions' regulation on disclosure, which means that not only corporates, non-financial corporates need to disclose, but the banks, asset managers will have to disclose environmental information in line with TCFD as well. And in that document from Shenzhen, a couple of other things are also very aggressive, very impressive. One is that the environmental insurance need to be made mandatory, meaning in major sectors with high environmental risks, these corporates will be required to purchase on a mandatory basis the pollution liability insurance. And the other thing is that they require all financial institutions to measure environmental impact. That become a mandatory requirement. It's not on a voluntary basis. And the final point I'd like to highlight from the Shenzhen legislation is that they impose penalties on non-compliance of all of these, which means that if you don't disclose environmental information, you get fines. If you don't buy the pollution liability insurance, you get fines. If you don't assess impact on environment, you get fines. It's a monetary fine, and the dollar amount is stated in legislation. Again, I would say this is more aggressive than the China Green Finance Guideline, which we had 4 years ago, and more aggressive than most of the policies and guidelines of OECD countries. It's a model that we should be all watching and learning from. Now, the question on ERA, which popped up again in many times during conversation, I think we need to refer to the Ngfs recent reports, These are two reports. One is called Overview of Environmental Risk Analysis by Financial Institutions, which express the official view of NGFS in promoting environmental and climate risk analysis among financial institutions, including banks, asset managers, and insurance company. And the other document also came out of NGFS last month, actually in September. It's called the Case Studies of Environmental Analysis Methodology, which is as long as 600 pages. That document, which is edited by a team led by myself, collects virtually all major methodologies that's available on the market. They are authored by more than 30 organizations. So I think it's a very good reference for the entire financial community to read and to take some of these into your practice. The next topic is on harmonization of taxonomy, which Ashley and Sean has discussed quite a bit. But let me say that there are two international mechanisms which are working on harmonization of taxonomies on an international basis. One is ISO, that's International Standard Organization, which set up a technical committee, it's called TC322 last year, to work on global harmonization of sustainable finance standards, which include taxonomy, include disclosure requirement, include measurement of impact, and include other aspects such as verification. But it's going to be a long journey, as I said to that group, which could be as long as 5 to 10 years to complete this set of taxonomy to cover not only the 4 or 5 aspects I just mentioned, but also the products. The other platform, which was launched a little more than a year ago, it's called Ipfs, International Platform, Ipsf, International Platform for Sustainable Finance, that was initiated by EU and joined by China and about a dozen countries. This platform has just set up a working group co-chaired by China and Europe, and I'm the China co-chair, to work on harmonization of sustainable finance taxonomy. And this group has developed its terms of reference, which will be divided into 2 phases. One is comparing the China and the European sustainable finance taxonomy, and second phase will be exploring the development of common taxonomy. That's what Ashley was referring to. That's originating, really, I think, the conversation that we had in May last year in Hong Kong. Now, in terms of products, I heard lots of very interesting discussions. Let me just summarize what I heard in terms of beyond green bonds. Beyond green bonds, we have now efforts driving the transition finance instruments, including transition bond. We had sustainability-linked loans and linked bonds. We have sustainability-linked derivatives, and we have green convertible bonds, we have blue bonds, and we have ESG ETFs. So all these are popping up like mushroom, which is a very good sign that our community is working so hard to generate new tailor-made products to fit the demand of different kind of green and low-carbon activities. The next topic is on GBA collaboration, which we discussed quite intensively earlier today. I think the advantage of combining resources within the GBA area is that, number one, Guangdong has a very large real economy. They have a real demand for green finance. For example, Madam Meng this morning was talking about green supply chain. It's a supply chain that's headed by Guangzhou Auto, which is surrounded by a few thousand smaller companies that provides components and raw material. And if we can shape the supply chain to a green one, which means that screening those green suppliers and providing cheap financing to these suppliers, then we can grow the green supply chain much faster than otherwise. And in this regard, I think the Guangdong demand can be matched partially by Hong Kong, because Hong Kong has its open market, and we may be able to structure products that can finance these supply chain activities at a lower cost than purely using domestic finance in Guangdong. And Shenzhen has an advantage, which is technology. So we need to use a lot of fintech, AI, big data. If we can then combine these resources, Guangdong's real economy, Shenzhen technology, Hong Kong's open market, I think we can do a lot of things to promote green finance collaboration within GBA. And the GBA Green Finance Alliance, which we launched together with Guangdong, Shenzhen, and Macau, has started 5 projects already, which we introduced, but we are looking to more projects. That's why we're inviting our members who are attending today to really propose your new ideas of what kind of green projects, green finance projects we can bring to the table and eventually can benefit not only this particular jurisdiction, but also the entire Greater Bay Area. The final point is on talents and education, which is lightly touched today by some of the commentators earlier today, but I do feel this is a major subject that we have to pay attention to because with carbon neutrality, green finance demand will grow much faster than before. And where do we get the talents, get these specialists? I think it's not enough to just incubate it within the system. We need to bring them from schools. So universities have the obligation to develop courses, develop debut programs, and maybe certificate programs. And we as an association can help them. This is something I talked to Hong Kong University of Science Technology, the Dean of Business School yesterday, and they're very keen. So I'm encouraging our members to help our universities and research community to develop more training capacity and educational program to support the long-term growth of our green finance program. So before closing, I'd like to thank all of you for attending the forum today, especially those who stay until last minute. And in particular, I'd like to thank the senior officials who joined us today, including Mr. Paul Chang, Chris Hui, Ashley, and Joseph Chen, Daryl. I think their participation demonstrates very strongly the support of the government to the Hong Kong Green Finance Association and the work we're doing in promoting the Hong Kong green financial services to China, to GBA, and to the Belt and Road sector. And once again, I'd like to encourage you to join more actively our activities, including the A working group we are now revamping. And if you want to be a co-chair of one of the working group under the Green Finance Association, raise your hand. Talk to Chao Ni or Tracy. And we also want you to create more projects under the GBA Green Finance Alliance. So actually, one more thing to thank is HSBC, especially Jonathan, for arranging the venue for us to have this wonderful, productive forum today. Thank you very much all again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next webinar, which I'm sure will be hosted by us very soon. And more importantly, I'm hoping that I'm going to see you offline in the not very distant future. Thank you again. That's the conclusion of our forum today.